Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. In this video I would like to talk about something that I think was a welcome addition to the 2024 version of Dungeons & Dragons, but also somewhat of a wasted opportunity because I think it could have been even better. And today, the topic of discussion is weapons in games. As a slight aside, I want to talk video games first. I dislike a lot of modern first-person shooter games because the weapons all feel kind of samey. In a contemporary first-person shooter, you can acquire a rifle or carbine that is relatively powerful, firing a intermediate or full-size rifle cartridge, so it does a lot of damage. With good optics, it can be accurate out to a decent range. It can be select fire, so if you need to put a lot of bullets into a small space at short range, it's good for that. And with extended magazines or Sentry drum magazines, it can have a high ammo capacity. It is a weapon that is quite good at everything. Alternatively, you can get a larger sniper rifle that's very good at long range, very powerful, and is still semi-automatic, has a decent magazine size, might even have select fire for fully automatic use as well. These weapons are good at everything, and choosing them isn't really a compromise. One of my favourite first-person shooters was Hidden and Dangerous 2, set during World War II. In that era, if you wanted the best all-round weapon, it was probably the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle with a decent medium range and a semi-automatic fire, no optics though. If you wanted a sniper rifle, you'd have to move to a bolt-action rifle, like the Springfield, the Lee Enfield, or the German Carabiner. They had smallish magazines, no semi-automatic fire, but they were accurate and did a lot of damage. If you wanted a high rate of fire, you'd have to have a submachine gun firing a pistol cartridge. So not as powerful, you didn't have the range, you definitely didn't have the accuracy, but you did get a lot of shots. And if you wanted a quiet weapon, then your choice was normally restricted to the Delisle CC, which was a bolt-action pistol caliber weapon, but it was very quiet. The weapon you chose would always have major compromises. And I like that about the game. You couldn't pick something that was good in every circumstance. There was always a compromise. Moving to roleplay games, one of my favourite roleplay games has been Battlelords of the 23rd Century. And I love the range of equipment you can give your characters there. There are books called the Lock and Load series, Armour, Equipment and Cybernetics, Weapons and Tactics. This is the older Lock and Load book. Look, there's a guy with a minigun on the front. How cool is that? Unrelated, I got the Compendium of Modern Firearms, which is actually by the people that did Cyberpunk. If I have a look here, yeah. R. Telsorian Games. And this is just pages and pages of weapon stats and for real historical weapons that were made by an armourer, someone who knows weapons for their living. Now, one of the great things about the weapons in Battlelords is everything is a compromise. There is no best weapon. The most expensive and powerful weapon in the game has terrible range, medium accuracy, medium rate of fire, and is a very specialised weapon. If you want something that can spray out lots of shots, it's not as powerful, it's not as accurate. If you want something that has a blast, it comes with its own downsides. There are hundreds and hundreds of different weapon systems in the game, and every one is a compromise. And it's not just a compromise on cost. You can't buy yourself a best all-round weapon. And I really like that. So everything is a choice. For a long time in Dungeons and Dragons, it didn't feel like there was a great choice. If you might have a choice between different weapons, but this one is a D10 piercing weapon and this one is a D10 bludgeoning weapon. And honestly, it felt very samey. I didn't like that. Most of the time in Dungeons and Dragons, you would end up choosing your weapon either purely on aesthetics, and there's nothing wrong with that, or more often because it synergized with a feat or a fighting style or a weapon ability, a class ability that did a certain damage type. So whether you chose a great sword or a great axe wasn't particularly important, but you wanted a great weapon so you could use great weapon fighting. And if you wanted to use polearm master as well, then you'd go with a glaive or a halberd. The weapons themselves weren't really that interesting, and that's unfortunate. What 2024 Dungeons and Dragons brought in was weapon masteries, and I think this was a fantastic step, that each weapon has an ability that goes with it. And this is how you make weapons different. It does damage and it does something else. Now, I think this could have been implemented in a much better way, but I'm going to say this is a clear improvement. The difference between a great sword and a great axe is not just piercing and slashing damage, it's the weapon mastery ability that comes with it. And I love attacks that do something other than just damage. One of my favourite roleplay characters I've played in the last few years has been Riplakish, my elven swordmaster. And I deliberately picked classes and feats that gave me options when I made a hit. So I had Great Weapon Master, so I could turn that on and off, and it would do extra damage extra damage, but at the cost of some accuracy. I also had Eldritch Smite, so on a hit I had something I could activate. I also had Battle Master Maneuvers, which I could activate on a hit. And if I'd had a chance to play the character to higher levels, I would have picked a few levels in College of Swords Bard, so I would have had Blade Flourishes. And I love games where on a hit you get to choose to do something else as well. And I think the weapon mastery features for 2024 Dungeons and Dragons are a step towards that. They give you a hit and something else. But what I really want from the game is choices. I talk about this a lot in other videos, particularly the Great Weapon Mystery. A choice is one where there isn't a clear answer. There might be multiple good answers, and the best answer isn't automatically obvious. So I like choices for players, and a system where you have a weapon attack that does damage, and then you make a choice. Do I activate ability A or do I activate ability B? That would be fantastic for me. It would really sort of enliven combat. I'm going to talk about how I think combat is a problem for Dungeons and Dragons in another video. But knowing my opinion on choices in games, adding choices that the player can make on each hit certainly would make combat more interesting. How would I have done weapon masteries different? Well, I wouldn't have tied weapon masteries to weapons, I would have tied them to abilities. So I would have given each weapon 3 or 4 different abilities that could be used. And characters learn these abilities, these masteries, as they progress and level up through martial, and maybe not always martial levels. So for example, a greatsword could have a cleave ability or a bash ability or a pierce ability that each do something different. And you choose the abilities that you learn as you level up, and then you pick your weapon based on the abilities that you've learned. And these abilities give you choices with each hit. Each hit, am I going to use this ability or am I going to use this ability? And perhaps at certain levels, when you become more proficient, you might get the ability to activate more than one of these weapon mastery properties on a hit. So I think weapon masteries are great. I think it's a fantastic idea to add damage and something else to weapons. The big problem with books like this, it's full of numbers, just numbers and numbers and numbers. And for a roleplay nerd and a numbers nerd like me, this is wonderful. But that's not really the game part that I want to be playing. I don't want to pick my weapons based on a slightly numerically insignificant advantage in some circumstances. I want to pick my weapons based on the abilities that they unlock for me. I want to do damage and something else. But then I also want to have a choice. Adding player choice is key for me. And changing the weapon mastery rules so that you get multiple masteries that you can access per weapon, certainly more for martial and exotic weapons than for simple weapons, this would make combat better. This would make the game more fun to play. So that's my thoughts on those discussion on that topic. I'd love to hear your opinions as well. And until then, enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.